Hello everybody and welcome back to Middle-earth. This is Count Hammer VHS with another video update for Total War Wainriders, and today I am very happy to bring you a preview for the League of the North. This is one of several Dwarven factions that will be playable in the mod. This one is a little bit different from what we have previously seen with the Durin's Folk Dwarven faction that is centered in Khazad-dûm. That was an entirely Dwarven faction, but here, as we will see, there is a mix of Dwarven units and Mannish units. You see, this faction, the League of the North, is going to be centered on the area roughly between the Iron Hills, the Lonely Mountain, and Dale, or the region of Dale, the region around the Lonely Mountain. And so this is an alliance of convenience, an alliance of necessity, we're imagining, between the Northmen, who are fleeing from the invading Wainriders to the south, and the Dwarves, who are maintaining an outpost and probably mining operation in the area as well. So before we talk more about the campaign, I want to take a look at the units here. Again, this is the work of Web84 with the textures and models of these guys, and some very fantastic stuff indeed. A lot of what you are going to see is the core unit roster for the faction, so there will be other options in addition to what you see here based on how you expand, but this is pretty much what you can expect in the homelands for the League of the North. And here we're looking at the Bodyguard unit. These are Dragon Slayers, we're calling them. They are Warhammer units, two-handed Warhammers, going to be effective against armor, very well armored, very tough little guys, as you can tell. And so this is going to be the family member Bodyguard that you will get. Although this is a mix of Mannish and Dwarven units, it is a Dwarven faction in terms of its family tree. So that's what you're going to expect for your Bodyguard units. You will also have some siege weapons, as you can expect. Let's take the pause off here. We'll see these guys in action. These are the Dwarven Siege Ballistas, one of my favorite units to play with in the mod. You'll also get the smaller ballistas, the more anti-personnel crossbow-like ballistas that are going to be more effective in field than on sort of city assaults. These are very versatile, can be useful in both capacities, and we're taking some shots at the approaching Western Horde. I do want to cruise over here before I forget to take a look at some of those Mannish troops, though. We've got a couple of our boys set up in an ambush position here in the woods. These are Border Foresters. They're going to be one of the lower tier units, and in combination with the Woodman Axes, I think these guys will both comprise your Tier 2 for your Mannish forces. And again, we've imagined that a lot of these guys are going to be representing kind of like refugees from Rovanion or from the fringes of Mirkwood who have fled across the river running and sought aid with the Dwarves, who have maintained a bit of a mining outpost in and around the Lonely Mountain and the Iron Hills. So these Border Foresters are going to be very lightly armed, although they do have a shield. Otherwise, armor is very light for these guys, and they're going to be acting as skirmishers, lending a bit of mobility and ranged capability to the faction, although they're going to be running away to skirmish, so they're not going to get a lot of javelin lobs in here just yet. The Woodman Axes are going to be a bit of melee, but not going to be terribly strong, and you can see I'm microing elsewhere, so they're not going to be very useful here, but they're a bit of a speed bump against these steppe lancers. Making up a more solid contingent, we can see the Northman swords here. We've got a very good line of fairly heavy infantry for the Mannish troops. And coming down, I think this is Tier 2, your Northman Militia are going to be a spear unit, as we can tell. I think Tier 2, again, fairly lightly armored, but good against cavalry, so they're going to do all right here. And in combination with the heavier armored Northman swords, can be a fairly effective force indeed. A bit further along, we can see much higher level Chief's Hearth troops. So these are primarily sword-wielding infantry, but they also have throwing axes, giving them a bit of extra versatility there, and very heavily armored. So these are going to have some mail, some scale, all kinds of good stuff. So you're going to have melee stuff covered for sure with this faction, but thanks to the Mannish contingent especially, you'll also have quite the options in terms of cavalry. So let's take a look back now at these Border Riders. You can see these are, again, a very light unit type. No shields even, but they are mounted and they do have throwing spears, so that is going to give them a bit of ranged punch. They have short spears to wield in melee as well, or on the charge, so they can be effective against other cav, delivering a bit of shock, but they're not going to be good in a stand-up melee. Other Mannish troops, Northman Longbows, these are, I think, tier 4 unit. You can tell that they are a heavily armored archer unit, so they're going to be standing in good stead, even if they get caught out. But of course, with all these Dwarven troops at your disposal, you're not going to want these guys to get caught up in a melee if you can avoid it. Some of those Dwarven troops include the fantastic-looking Dwarven spears, very good against cavalry, as you could imagine. The more base, sort of tier 1 Dwarven axes, and then your Dwarven warhammers are going to be kind of a flanking unit and a shock troop to deliver some armor-piercing punch. I think that covers most of the units. There are some other archers here, some Mannish archers. Where are they? The Woodman Longbows, right here, the Woodman bows. These are very similar to some Bjorning troops. In this particular fight, they're not going to be terribly decisive, but in your Mannish settlements, you will have a couple of different bow units, as we've seen. These guys are going to be your lower tier, fast, probably effective in the woods, but not particularly good in melee. The higher tier, of course, those Northmen Longbows. And for your Dwarven settlements, you will have some Dwarven bows, although these guys will be much more of a hybrid unit, as you can tell from the effectiveness of their armor and the fact that they do wield axes. So all in all, this battle progressed fairly well, in my opinion. We had a bit of a shock in our left when the Wainriders moved in through those forests very quickly and threw back a lot of our Northmen line. But thanks to the Dragon Slayers and the Northmen swords, we were able to hold this portion until we were able to deal with other portions of the battlefield, then bring the Border Riders down into a charge. After we killed the enemy general, that was sort of the end for the right flank, and then we were able to sort of wrap it up here shortly. One other unit I skipped over was the Dwarven Axe Throwers. These guys are, of course, a melee and ranged unit. Very useful. So many of the Dwarven troops that you see here available to the League of the North are going to be similar to what you would see in Durin's folk. They don't have all of the same units in common, as you can sort of check for yourself by going back to look at the video there. But the real advantage of the League of the North is its alliance with men, with those Northmen. And we do know that this is somewhat attested. Again, discussions of, or Tolkien's writings of the Wainrider invasion do describe people of Rhovanion fleeing north and crossing the river, running, where they merged with the folk of Dale under Erebor. That is how it is described. And it's an interesting way to describe it, given that we know that Dale was not really founded as a lordship for many hundreds of years to come, and Erebor, of course, was not a kingdom for many hundreds of years to come after the Wainrider invasion. So that's why we've gone for the League of the North. It's not a kingdom. The Dwarves of the Iron Hills are not an independent kingdom, but we do know that Dwarves were living in the Iron Hills throughout this entire time, and really a lot of where the inspiration for this faction came from in its combination of Dwarven and Mannish units can be found in a fascinating essay of Dwarves and Men, which you can find in the Peoples of Middle-earth, which I absolutely recommend. I have not read most of those History of Middle-earth books, but Peoples of Middle-earth really just rewards some time if you're into the lore of Tolkien, because it not only gives some really interesting early drafts of the appendices and timelines and things like that, but it also goes into some really interesting detail about these other lesser-known periods. And in Of Dwarves and Men, we read about this alliance between the Longbeard Dwarves and the free men of the north, the Northmen who lived in essentially Rhovanion, which is a broad area stretching from the Misty Mountains east toward Rhûn. So in the Second Age, apparently, the Longbeard Dwarves had essentially the Misty Mountains, the Grey Mountains, and over the Iron Hills and to Erebor. That was essentially their territory, and the men who lived in that region joined with them because they could provide things like animal husbandry, they could provide food, they could do all these agricultural tasks which the dwarves were not particularly skilled or interested in doing. And in the return, the dwarves could provide excellent armor and craftsmanship, all those types of things. But the men were also noteworthy for their skill at archery. They were said to be able to surround orcish armies in the plain with their companies of horsed archers and basically destroy them. So it's really interesting for us to imagine that some echo of that interesting alliance of the Second Age may have survived into the Third Age in some form. So in the end, I think the League of the North is going to be a really interesting, scrappy faction. but clearly very capable if you can sort of build up to it. There's a lot about this campaign that is undecided. Given that Erebor is not a kingdom yet, we're probably not going to have it in a very well-developed state at the start of the mod. This is something that you'll have to build quite a bit to turn it into the Lonely Mountain that we all know. And I'm not sure yet if it's going to start as a minor settlement, which you can then grow into a full settlement, sort of like how Minas Ithil works in the 4th Age, or Austin Ethel, something along those lines. Or maybe it will just start as a very, very undeveloped regular major settlement for the dwarves. A lot to be decided, so I'm curious to see what you think of this faction. This is one of the most anticipated factions in my point of view. I probably say that about all of these, but they are just shaping up very wonderfully. And so I look forward to further updates here, so stay tuned to the channel for that. And check us out on TotalWarCenter.net. You can find the 4th Age forums there, where we do have some threads devoted to the Wainriders development, and there's some excellent screenshots by Webba84 in the update thread for that. So I hope you will join me for further videos, and until then, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.